hidden in garages, locked behind factory doors, or built in numbers so small they slip through history. These machines were never meant for the spotlight. They were the secret beasts of the car world, untamed, overpowered, and often unfinished. No ads, no fanfare, just raw performance and whispered legends among those lucky enough to see them. Here are 12 secret beasts you never knew existed. And once you do, you'll wonder why no one ever told you before. Number 1. The 1992 Cadillac Brew 383-stroker RWD Mule is one of the last true ghost stories from Cadillac's rear-wheel drive era. A nearly mythological blend of classic American Luxo barge styling and unapologetic V8 aggression, built in the shadows at a time when Cadillac was struggling to redefine itself. As front-wheel drive platforms and Euro-style design cues crept into the lineup, the Brougham stood stubbornly frozen in time. Long, square, chrome-laden, and unmistakably old school. But someone inside Cadillac, maybe a small, frustrated group of engineers or fleet program managers, decided to send the Brougham out with one last rumble of defiance. By the early 1990s, the Brougham was ancient even by Cadillac standards. The platform dated back to the late 1970s, with its full-frame construction, solid rear axle, and body-on-frame design that traced its lineage to the tailfin era. The average Brougham buyer in 1992 was collecting Social Security, and Cadillac knew it. But instead of quietly euthanizing the old barge, someone came up with a wild idea. Take the classic layout and infuse it with genuine performance. The kind of torque-heavy street-taming muscle that hadn't been seen in a Cadillac since the early 70s. The plan? Use the Brougham as a platform to test a high-output, small-block V8, specifically a 383-stroker, created by punching out a 350 with a longer crankshaft to give more torque and top-end horsepower. This wasn't a GM crate motor project either. These engines were reportedly hand-built by a group inside Cadillac engineering, with performance camshafts, ported heads, high-flow fuel injection systems adapted from GM truck lines, and custom engine management tuning to make them as streetable as they were savage. Some sources say output exceeded 375 horsepower and over 420 lb-ft of torque, figures utterly alien in the world of Cadillac at that time. To support that brutal torque in a car that still weighed close to 4,800 pounds, the mules were fitted with beefed-up 4L80E automatic transmissions, upgraded drive shafts, 3.73 rear differentials with limited slip, and reinforced rear axles likely borrowed from heavy-duty police or light truck parts bins. The suspension was retuned with stiffer bushings, firmer springs, and thicker sway bars to try and tame body roll. But the ride still had Cadillac's signature marshmallow quality. The result was something that felt like a cruise liner with a drag boat engine stuffed inside. Performance was, by all accounts, shocking. 0 to 60 in the low 6-second range, quarter miles in the high 13s. And yet from the outside, it still looked like a retired executive's church car. Wire wheel covers, vinyl half roof, and opera lamps included. One Cadillac development insider, speaking anonymously years later, described it best. It was like a low-flying couch with a small block thunderstorm underneath. You'd stomp the pedal, and the whole dashboard would twist sideways. But it moved like nothing else Cadillac built in that decade. Only a handful of these Brougham 383 mules were made, some say as few as 3 or 4, and they were tested quietly through Cadillac's livery and commercial fleet divisions. The idea was to offer a special high-performance export variant for Europe or the Middle East, where American V8 sedans still held a certain outlaw charm, or to serve high-end limo fleet looking for more power without compromising rear-drive reliability. But when the idea was floated to corporate, it was dead on arrival. Marketing hated it. Legal was nervous about emissions compliance, and upper management saw no future for hot-rodded land yachts in a world obsessed with German sedans and fuel economy. So the cars were buried. Some were stripped for parts. At least one was reportedly sold to a GM-connected collector in Michigan and quietly registered with its original va-yen, posing as a stock Brougham. Another may have been shipped to the Middle East for testing, But Cadillac never acknowledged the program, never promoted it, and certainly never offered it for sale. By 1990, the Brougham nameplate was gone, replaced by the softer, cleaner, and front-wheel drive Cadillac Fleetwood of the new era. Today, the 1992 Cadillac Brougham 383 Mule is one of the most obscure performance experiments in GM history. A forgotten what-if moment when America's most traditional luxury car flirted with muscle car madness just before the lights went out. No photos were published, no press drives occurred, and no VIN codes distinguished these monsters from their geriatric showroom siblings. You wouldn't know you were looking at one unless you lifted the hood and then braced yourself. It's hard to imagine something like this being greenlit today, or even back then, really. But for a brief flickering moment, someone at Cadillac tried to send the old Brougham out, not with a whimper, but with a thunderclap. A street brawler disguised as a lounge chair. Number 2. The 1966 Chevrolet Biscane L72 Police Interceptor is one of those rare anomalies in American automotive history. A purpose-built brute that never appeared in brochures, never showed up at a dealership, and never even made it into official Chevrolet press materials. It wasn't built for the public. It wasn't meant for collectors or muscle car kids in high school parking lots. It was built for one reason, and one reason only: to catch the fastest, cockiest, and most reckless drivers in America. And for a few short years, it did. The mid-1960s was the Wild West of American roadways. Muscle cars were multiplying like wildfire. By 1980, a stock GTO or 442 could break into the low 14s in the quarter mile. Roadside stop signs became starting lines. Teenage hot shoes were terrorizing quiet back roads and open highways alike. Law enforcement, particularly in rural areas in southern states, simply couldn't keep up. Their patrol cars, mostly full-size sedans with sleepy small blocks or mild big blocks, were completely outgunned. They were comfortable but useless in a chase against a street-prepped Chevelle SS or a Hemi-powered Corvette. Someone at Chevrolet, possibly through a backdoor fleet relationship or under pressure from state officials, answered the call. What they delivered was something totally unexpected. A stripped-down, no-nonsense Biscane sedan with the heart of a factory drag car. These cars were ordered in tiny batches, often hand-specified by state procurement officers or highway patrol divisions, and built under GM's COPO, Central Office Production Order, system. The same loophole later used to build the legendary Yenko Camaros and other dealer supercars. At the core of the beast was the mighty 72 427 cubic inch V8, a high-compression, solid-lifter monster officially rated at 425 horsepower. Though anyone familiar with Chevrolet big blocks in the 60s knows that figure was laughably conservative. Real-world dyno pulls put it well above 460 HP, with torque numbers to match. It was an engine meant for super stock drag strips, not police cruisers. But with a forged steel crank, big valve heads, high-rise intake, and a Holley four-barrel the size of a lunchbox, the L72 was devastatingly powerful. Mated to this brute was a heavy-duty Muncie 4-speed manual transmission, yes, a manual in a police car, and a beefed-up 12-bolt rear axle with a positraction limited-slip differential. Some came with 4.10 or 3.73 rear-end gears for maximum launch. Others were geared longer for top speed runs on straight, flat highways. The frames were reinforced, suspension components were upgraded with heavy-duty springs and sway bars, and cooling systems were oversized to cope with pursuit abuse in the summer heat. A few even came with factory tachometers, an oddity for a fleet car, but it was still a boîte Biscane, which meant it had no frills whatsoever. No badges, no chrome trim, bench seats, rubber floors, steel wheels. In full uniform, it wore the livery of state troopers, often in dark navy or olive green, with roof-mounted lights and spotlight mirrors. And yet under the hood was an engine that could humiliate any GTO, Mustang, or Charger that dared to taunt it. One retired Tennessee patrolman described it like this: "It was a cop car that could smoke your GTO. That was the whole point. We didn't run the siren. We just got behind him, floored it, and waited for him to panic when they realized they couldn't shake a four-door Chevy with dog dish hubcaps." Few of these L72 Biscanes survived. Most were driven hard and put away wrecked, scrapped, or quietly decommissioned after years of brutal highway work. Their manual transmissions made them unpopular with second-hand fleet buyers, and the few civilians who ended up with one usually had no idea what they were getting. No L72 police package was ever advertised. No press release announced their existence. For decades, they were a whisper, a ghost story among state police retirees and muscle car historians. Today, surviving examples are almost mythological. Only a handful have ever been confirmed through original build sheets or matching engine numbers. Most collectors passed them over in the past, thinking they were just bare-bones fleet sedans. But those in the know, they've started to hunt because they understand what these cars really were. They were, though, muscle cars' natural predator. Built quietly, deployed in secret, forgotten immediately after their service, and yet they embodied everything wild and contradictory about 1960s America. Brute power hidden in plain sight, authority wrapped in anonymity, a sedan built to catch street racers at their own game. If you ever see a 66 Biscane at a car show with nothing but a steel dashboard and a 427 under the hood, look closer. You might be looking at one of the baddest, most erased legends to ever wear a badge. Number 3. The 1988 Dodge Aries RT 2.2 Turbo 5-speed concept is one of those bizarre, too-good-to-be-true legends that somehow, and very briefly, actually existed. It was never part of a product roadmap, never intended for a brochure, and certainly never shown at an auto show. It was born from boredom, built with spare parts, and nearly unleashed as the most absurd factory hot rod of the 1980s. A car so unassuming, so aggressively beige, that even its creators couldn't keep a straight face. But then it did something nobody expected. It worked. The Dodge Aries, the quintessential K car, was the automotive embodiment of Reagan-era pragmatism. It was cheap, upright, front-wheel drive, and perfectly unremarkable. America bought millions. It saved Chrysler from extinction. But no one in their right mind ever called it exciting. By 1988, the platform was already ancient. The Aries was on its last legs, destined for taxi fleets, used car lots, and retirement communities. And that's exactly what made it perfect for mischief. A few rogue Chrysler engineers in the Performance Development Group, the same hot-blooded crew that had been quietly turbocharging Daytonas and LeBarons, decided to build a what-if test mule using the company's most hilariously inoffensive platform. Their idea was simple: take the lightest, dullest K car available and stuff it with Chrysler's most potent front-drive engine setup just to see what would happen. What they ended up with was a quiet monster that could humiliate sports cars costing 3 times as much. At its heart was the Turbo 2 2.2-liter intercooled 4-cylinder, a compact but vicious little engine pulled from the Dodge Shelby Daytona. With forged internals, high-flow fuel injection, a Garrett turbocharger pushing 12 psi, and a front-mounted intercooler, the Turbo 2 was good for an official 175 horsepower and 200 pounds of torque. In a car weighing barely 20,600 pounds, that was more than enough. But they didn't stop there. To back up the power, they installed the heavy-duty Getrag 5-speed manual transmission. Originally designed for more robust performance models, suspension was overhauled with firmer bushings, stiffer springs, and larger sway bars from Shelby's parts bin. Brakes were upgraded, and wide steel wheels with sticky rubber replaced the dinky stock tires. Inside, it was left mostly stock. Bench seat, column shifter retained for fun, and the standard faux wood dashboard that looked like it came from a 1974 Sears catalog. And from the outside, it still looked like a high school geometry teacher's car. But the performance, well, that was another story. According to Chrysler insiders, the Aries RT prototype ran 360 in under 7 seconds, faster than a stock Mustang LX 5.0 automatic of the same year. In highway pulls, it embarrassed Camaros, and in tighter corners, the light front end and sticky tires gave it shocking agility for a car originally built for grocery store parking lots. As one of the engineers later joked, "We built the ultimate sleeper out of America's most boring car." The best part was blowing the doors off a Mustang while sitting on a bench seat and listening to AM radio. The car was so ridiculous and so effective that it caught the attention of Chrysler product planners. For a brief moment, there were real discussions about offering a limited-run Dodge Aries RT, possibly badged under the Shelby name, or as a special dealership-only oddity. Some dealers reportedly expressed interest, envisioning it as a low-cost alternative to the GLHS or Daytona. It would have been the automotive equivalent of an assassin in khakis. But then reality set in. Chrysler executives realized what they were about to unleash: a hot rod version of their most conservative, economy-minded sedan. It would have mocked the entire K-car legacy. Worse, it might have actually outperformed the company's own halo cars at the time. The Daytona Shelby Z, the Spirit RT, even the expensive Mitsubishi-built Conquest TSI. And worst of all, it would have exposed how cheaply and easily genuine performance could be built into an otherwise disposable compact. And that wasn't a message Chrysler wanted getting out. The project was quietly shelved. The prototype was dismantled. And just like that, the fastest Aries in history became another whispered legend among Detroit insiders. Number 4. The 1978 Lincoln Continental Mark or 60. Drag package is one of those whispered about machines that lives at the outer edges of muscle car mythology. Too wild to be real, too consistent in the stories to be fiction. Officially, it never happened. Lincoln never offered a high-output package for the Mark V in any brochure, never advertised performance options, and certainly never endorsed drag racing in a 5,000-pound luxury coupe. But deep in the South, late in the decade, something strange and powerful was rolling off car haulers under the radar. And if you talk to the old-timers in Georgia, Alabama, or the Carolinas, guys who remember stoplight wars and late-night quarter-mile runs behind gas stations, you'll hear the same tale again and again, that a small batch of 1978 Mark V's came factory-equipped with something much hotter than advertised. These weren't ordinary 460-powered Continentals. By the late 70s, the standard 460 cubic inch V8 was a neutered beast, choked by smog controls and low compression. On paper, it was lucky to make 208 horsepower, fine for highway cruising, but a far cry from the fire-breathing Lincolns of just a few years earlier. But the story goes that a few performance-savvy Lincoln Mercury dealers, especially in Georgia and Tennessee, used their connections and ordering codes to get something special. A version of the 460 based on the Western Police Interceptor block. With a higher output camshaft, improved timing curve, larger valves, and dual exhaust. Some even claim these cars came with 103/50.1 rear axle ratios, heavy-duty cooling systems, revised torque converters, and specially tuned vacuum advanced distributors, all cribbed from the police and tow package bins. Unofficially, these engines were making over 300 Nm and nearly 500 pound-feet of torque, even in their emissions-era form. What did that translate to on the street? A rolling fortress of chrome and leather that could quietly walk away from a Camaro Z28 or a Mustang II Cobra. It didn't matter that it weighed over 5,000 pounds or had more sheet metal than an aircraft hangar. When the light turned green and the pedal hit the floor, the torque hit like a freight train. There was no tire smoke, no drama, just a sudden, unnerving forward surge that left challengers blinking in disbelief. And because it was still a Mark V, with opera windows, hideaway headlights, and enough velour to upholster a casino, no one saw it coming. One Georgia street racer, who claims to have gone up against one in 1979, remembered it clearly. It looked like a damn wedding cake rolling down the street, white with gold trim. I laughed when he pulled up. Then he smoked me by 3 cars and just floated away like it didn't even notice. There are no official numbers, no press clippings, not even any clear dealer documentation. Lincoln, after all, was a luxury brand. They weren't about to advertise a drag-ready hot rod to retirees buying Cartier editions. But enthusiasts and street racers of the time remember the cars, and every once in a while one pops up in a barn or an estate sale with just enough oddball clues to raise eyebrows. Dual exhausts where there shouldn't be, gear ratios that don't match the build sheet, or engine internals that feel suspiciously aggressive for a 78 smog motor. Most of them were likely destroyed, junked, or quietly decommissioned after decades of under-the-radar performance. Their owners rarely bragged. It wasn't the kind of car you took to the strip. It was the kind of car you used to surprise a Corvette on a midnight stretch of I-75 and disappear before anyone got your plate. In the end, the 1978 Lincoln Mark V 460 HO drag package lives on as a kind of outlaw chapter in the history of American performance. It was a swan song for the personal luxury era, a last gasp of brute torque hidden under vinyl tops and opera lamps. Never acknowledged, never repeated. But if you ever hear a story about a land yacht that moved like a missile and vanished like a ghost, believe it. Because in the waning hours of the 70s, someone at Lincoln said yes, just long enough to build a few big, beautiful, torquing happy monsters. And then they locked the files forever. Number 5. The 1994 Chevrolet Caprice SS LT1 6-speed prototype is one of the great what could have been legends of the early 90s muscle sedan renaissance. A forgotten rocket ship in a fleet of cop cars, built by engineers who dared to dream bigger than fleet contracts and budget cuts. While the 1994-1996 Impala SS has earned its place in muscle sedan history, what few know is that it was almost something much, much wilder. A true manual transmission muscle machine with Corvette Daytona, built to run silent, run deep, and run down damn near anything in its way. To understand the SS 6-speed Caprice, you first have to go back to the internal shift happening at GM in the early 90s. The Caprice was largely a fleet and law enforcement car, built on the heavy-duty B-body platform, with long-standing roots in police and taxi service. But under the hood, thanks to parts bin engineering and some quietly rebellious design decisions, it had the bones of a monster. Starting in 1910, GM began equipping the Caprice 9C1 police package with a detuned version of the Corvette's LT1 5.7L V8, good for 260 HP and 330 lb-ft of torque. That alone turned heads, especially when people realized that the Caprice could run neck and neck with Fox body Mustangs in pursuit testing. But someone in Chevrolet engineering, likely from the B-body development group in Warren, Michigan, asked a forbidden question. What if we built a real performance version? One that wasn't limited by fleet specs or automatic-only drivetrains. The result was the Wow's Caprice SS LT1 6-speed prototype, a single-digit handful of engineering test mules that paired the Corvette-derived LT1 with a Borg-Warner T56 6-speed manual transmission, the same gearbox used in the Camaro Z28 and Corvette of the day. These weren't slapdash swaps. The clutch linkage was engineered from scratch, the tunnel reworked, pedal boxes refabricated, and the gear ratios tweaked to match the Caprice's 3.08 or 3.42 limited slip rear ends. The body was stripped of chrome, dropped on full police package suspension, with reinforced sway bars, gas shocks, and heavy-duty cooling. Brakes were upgraded with larger calipers borrowed from the 9C1 parts bin, and the wheels were widened steelies wrapped in sticky Goodyear performance tires. It was, in essence, the Black Ops version of a Corvette, disguised as your uncle's retirement cruiser. Chevy engineers reportedly used the prototypes for evaluation purposes. One served as a GM proving grounds test car, another was rumored to be loaned to an undercover Detroit area law enforcement division, and at least one was passed around to high-level execs to gauge interest in a true SS that could be offered alongside the automatic-only Impala SS. The result? Utter silence. According to internal sources, the project was killed before it left the garage floor. GM bean counters balked at the cost of engineering a manual transmission into a platform never designed for it. Marketing didn't know how to pitch a four-door muscle car with a stick shift. And worst of all, it risked outperforming the Corvette and Camaro, which were sacred to the brand's hierarchy. As one B-body chassis engineer later lamented, it was a Corvette for undercover work, but no one approved the badge. The few manual Caprices that were built were quietly retired, dismantled, or destroyed. None ever made it to public auction. None were sold to collectors, The program was buried, and the world got the Impala SS instead. A fine car with menacing black paint, 17-inch wheels, and an automatic 4L60E that could never quite match what the engineers had first envisioned. But among those who drove it, those who felt what a Caprice could be with a 6-speed and Corvette power, the memory remains sharp. It wasn't just fast, it was shocking. Sub-6-second Aries 60 sprints, tire chirping, gear changes, and effortless highway pulls in a machine as big as a mid-size SUV. It defied everything GM was supposed to build in 1990, and maybe that's why it never made it out alive. No photographs have surfaced, no VINs confirmed, but a few handwritten logs from Milford, a dusty service manual with T56 MOD scribbled in the margins, and the stories passed down from engineers at old car shows all whisper the same truth. There was once a Caprice that barked through 6 gears and could chase down anything on the freeway. It just came 20 years too soon. Number 6. The 1974 Oldsmobile Omega SX 455 wasn't just obscure. It was an act of rebellion. Born in a time when muscle was dying and regulators were clamping down on displacement like it was a disease, this forgotten fire breather was never officially sanctioned, never publicly acknowledged, and absolutely never meant to exist. Yet it did, in dark corners of Oldsmobile dealer lots, behind closed garage doors, and in the whispered bets of late-night street races. On paper, it was just another notchback compact, a rebadged version of the Chevy Nova designed to give Oldsmobile something to sell in the shrinking economy segment. But in practice, it was a blunt force weapon, wrapped in the plainest possible cloth. This wasn't a product of the Oldsmobile factory floor in Lansing. You wouldn't find it in a sales catalog. You wouldn't even find it in corporate service bulletins. Instead, it came from the shadows, from local dealers in states like Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, who still remembered the glory days of the 4 and 42, and weren't quite ready to surrender their performance pride to the rising tide of smog regulations, insurance premiums, and corporate apathy. These dealers found a loophole: order a base Omega SX with the largest engine bay available, originally meant for a small block V8, and then drop in a big block Olds 455, using factory mounts, service parts, and just enough ingenuity to make it seem stock on paper. Most of these 455 swaps use the standard L75 455 from the Oldsmobile Delta 88 or 98, already torquey monsters in full-size sedans. But some dealers went further. Anecdotes, largely unverified but widely repeated, say a few Omegas were equipped with W30 spec components: high-flow heads, a hotter camshaft, aluminum intake manifolds, and even functional under-bumper ram air setups adapted from 442 leftovers. The power output of these creations ranged from 310 horsepower to a rumored 400-plus in the most aggressive builds, with torque figures easily surpassing 500 all in a car that weighed barely 3,200 pounds. That's nearly 800 pounds less than the full-size Olds models these engines were meant for. And that's where things got dangerous. The Omega, despite its shared DNA with the Nova, was never engineered for big block punishment. The unibody flexed under load. Rear axles protested. Cooling systems struggled to keep pace. Drivers reported axle hops so violent it shattered shock mounts. Tires disintegrated after a weekend of testing. And yet, those who drove them wouldn't trade the experience for anything. One retired Oldsmobile Zone rep, speaking off-record years later, said, "There was one in Wichita that ran 12.9s on slicks. On the street, it looked like a mailman's car. That was the point. It made everything else look stupid, even our own 442s. Acceleration was violent and unpredictable. The light nose made the car skittish off the line, and traction was a luxury, not a guarantee. But when it hooked up, usually after some suspension tweaks and stickier tires, it would launch. Mid-13s on pump gas, high 12s with tuning, faster than a Trans Am, faster than a Corvette, faster than a Mustang Mach 1, and all without so much as a rear spoiler or hood scoop. But the Omega SX 455 was never meant to last. 1974 was already the beginning of the end. The EPA was cracking down hard. Fuel prices spiked after the Arab oil embargo. High-displacement engines were suddenly the enemy. Oldsmobile was shifting its focus toward diesel efficiency and luxury interiors. And the public? They were done with gas guzzlers, or so the headline said. The 455 swapped Omega was a last gasp, not of the factory, but of the culture that had built the muscle car era from the ground up. By 1975, the opportunity was gone. Stricter emissions rules made engine swaps harder to hide. Insurance companies penalized displacement harshly, and GM's own internal politics discouraged dealers from messing with the corporate parts balance. The Omega SX 455 quietly vanished. Some were crushed, others stripped for parts, and a few ended up in the hands of kids who didn't fully understand what they had and promptly wrapped them around telephone poles. No official production numbers exist. Some believe only 10 to 20 Browns were ever built this way, and even fewer survived the decades that followed. Occasionally, one appears on forums or at drag strips, usually modified beyond recognition. Matching numbers engines? Forget it. These cars were Frankensteins by design. VINs never meant to carry that much torque. And so the legend remains just that, a ghost story told in garages. A growling monster that lived briefly in 1974, wearing a badge nobody feared and a body nobody remembered. The Omega SX 455 was the kind of car that never should have existed. Too fast, too raw, too perfect a contradiction. A luxury badge wrapped around a street brawler's heart. Number 7. The 1985 Pontiac Pharaoh GT twin-turbo prototype is one of those fascinating automotive legends that sits just beneath the surface of mainstream muscle and sports car history. A secret chapter from a time when GM engineers dared to dream big, even as the company was tightening its grip on costs and emissions. The standard Pharaoh GT, introduced a couple of years earlier, was itself a bold gamble. A lightweight mid-engine American sports car built to capture some of the exotic flair European models had, but at a much more accessible price point. It was never meant to be a blistering supercar, but inside Pontiac's engineering labs, a small group of visionaries envisioned something far wilder. A twin-turbocharged version of the Pharaoh's 2.8-liter V6 that would deliver the kind of explosive, neck-snapping power that could rewrite the rules for American performance cars. The idea was revolutionary. Forced induction was still relatively new for mainstream American cars, and pairing it with a mid-engine layout, something more commonly associated with the exotic Italian supercars, promised handling and power in a combination nobody in Detroit was seriously chasing yet. Pontiac engineers developed a complex twin-turbo system designed to squeeze every ounce of power from the small V6, producing an estimated output north of 300 horsepower, a staggering figure considering the base Pharaoh GT barely made 140. But raw power was only half the challenge. The team also had to redesign suspension components, upgrade brakes, and develop new cooling solutions to handle the additional heat generated by the turbochargers. Even with these efforts, early testing revealed the car was an unruly beast. Drivers reported the car's torque came on suddenly, with an almost violent surge as the turbos spooled up. The lightweight Pharaoh chassis struggled to keep the power planted, especially since the mid-engine layout altered the car's weight distribution in ways that made traction inconsistent. Suspension components, designed originally for a tame commuter car, flexed and creaked under the new stresses. Transmissions were repeatedly destroyed during testing, unable to reliably cope with the sudden bursts of power. Some early prototypes suffered from severe turbo lag, followed by sudden boost spikes, making throttle control a nightmare, even for experienced drivers. From a management standpoint, the project quickly became a nightmare. The cost of re-engineering components and the necessary recalibration for emissions compliance made the project prohibitively expensive. GM was already grappling with fuel economy standards and safety regulations that were pushing many performance projects into oblivion. Marketing was unsure how to position a car that was fast enough to compete with European turbocharged sports cars, yet based on a relatively cheap and quirky platform with a mixed reputation. Concerns about insurance premiums and consumer acceptance only added to the hesitancy. In the end, the project was killed quietly, never officially announced or acknowledged beyond the walls of Pontiac's engineering division. The twin-turbo Pharaohs were locked away, their existence reduced to whispered rumors, occasional blurry photos, and fragments of internal memos leaked by former engineers. The company focused instead on improving the naturally aspirated models and exploring safer, less risky technology paths. Yet the legacy of the twin-turbo Pharaoh lives on among enthusiasts and insiders as a symbol of what could have been. It was a glimpse into a future where American cars could combine innovation, raw power, and handling sophistication, years before turbocharging and mid-engine layouts became mainstream. One Pontiac engineer recalled years later, with a mix of pride and frustration, "You felt it the moment the boost kicked in, like the whole car came alive, ready to launch like a rocket. But it was also a wild animal. You couldn't just push the button and hope for the best. You had to be a master of timing and control, or it would bite you hard." The twin-turbo Pharaoh was more than a performance experiment. It was a bold statement of intent from a company not yet ready to surrender the muscle car spirit, an ambitious, dangerous, and visionary project crushed by the harsh realities of the automotive industry in the mid-1980s. Its brief, hidden existence reminds us that even in the darkest periods of muscle car decline, there were still engineers dreaming of power, speed, and innovation. And sometimes, just sometimes, those dreams came closer to reality than anyone realized. Number 8. The 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429 convertible is an almost mythical chapter in muscle car history, a rare, secretive beast born out of Ford's engineering ambition during one of the most electrifying eras in American automotive culture. The Boss 429 Coupe is already hailed as a legendary powerhouse, created primarily to homologate the huge 429 cubic inch engine for NASCAR competition, producing a brutal 375 horsepower that thundered through streets and tracks alike. But the story of the convertible variant is far more elusive, shrouded in secrecy, rumor, and tantalizing whispers that hint at a machine so wild and uncompromising that it never saw the light of day as a production model. Yet its legacy continues to captivate enthusiasts decades later. Unlike the mass-produced Boss 429 coupes, the convertible was never officially cataloged or sold to the public. It existed as a hand-built prototype, or perhaps a handful of prototypes, created not for mass production, but rather as an engineering experiment, a showcase for Ford's engineering capabilities, and possibly as a tool for promotional and executive use. Converting a Boss 429 coupe into a convertible was no trivial task. The massive engine alone presented daunting challenges. The 429 cubic inch V8, with its massive forged pistons, huge valves, and high-performance cams, was one of the most demanding power plants ever shoehorned into a Mustang chassis. Fitting it into a convertible with its inherent lack of structural rigidity compared to a fixed-roof coupe required intensive re-engineering to reinforce the chassis, stiffen the frame, and prevent catastrophic flex that could compromise both safety and handling. Engineers reinforced the floor pan and subframe, beefed up the suspension components, and revised the weight distribution to compensate for the missing roof. But despite these efforts, the car's handling was still notoriously difficult. The open top amplified every ounce of the engine's raw power, making the Mustang an unpredictable and ferocious ride. The convertible's balance was a delicate dance between speed and control, where one wrong move on the throttle could send the rear wheels into an uncontrollable slide. Test drivers reported that the car demanded respect. It was unforgiving and brutal, a beast best tamed only by the most skilled hands. Its powertrain, the same legendary 429 Ci V8 that helped cement the Boss 429's place in muscle car history, was no less monstrous in the convertible. The engine's deep rumble, explosive torque, and thunderous exhaust note made the convertible a rolling symphony of muscle. But the sacrifice in weight due to reinforcements and the aerodynamic compromises of an open top meant the ride was rough, raw, and less refined than its coupe sibling. Fuel economy was laughable, emissions compliance was a non-starter, and the sheer unpredictability of the convertible's handling likely sealed its fate within the corporate boardrooms. The car was never advertised, never documented in official sales brochures, and was effectively erased from Ford's public narrative. Yet inside the company, the convertible was something of a legend, a hidden gem known only to a select few engineers, test drivers, and executives who understood its ferocity and the risks involved in bringing such a machine to market. According to insider anecdotes, the car was primarily used for promotional purposes, executive thrill rides, and possibly as a test bed for suspension and chassis technology that might trickle down into future models. Some stories claim the convertible was driven only by high-ranking Ford officials who appreciated its brutal power but knew better than to unleash it on an unsuspecting public. Collectors and historians have chased this phantom for decades. Rumors persist that a handful of these convertible prototypes survive today, hidden away in private collections or forgotten corners of Ford's archives. Occasionally, blurry photographs or secondhand accounts surface online, fueling the mythos surrounding this rare and secret Mustang. Enthusiasts debate the car's exact specifications, performance figures, and handling characteristics. But the truth remains elusive, locked behind layers of corporate secrecy and the passage of time. One former Ford employee famously described the car as a boss's boss, not meant for the streets, too dangerous for public hands. A fire-breathing demon in a convertible shell, and only the bravest were given the keys. This comment captures the essence of the car perfectly. A raw, untamed muscle car that could have revolutionized the Mustang lineup, blending brutal power with open-air freedom, but was ultimately too wild for its own good. The 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429 convertible remains a haunting what-if, a reminder of an era when American automakers pushed the boundaries of performance and engineering, even if some of those boundary-pushing creations never reached. Number 9. The 1991 Dodge Daytona iRock RT AWD prototype is one of the most intriguing and almost mythical what-if stories from the waning years of Chrysler's performance experimentation era. At a time when the American auto industry was grappling with changing consumer tastes, rising emissions regulations, and fierce competition from both Japanese and European imports, Chrysler engineers sought to push the envelope by blending traditional muscle car spirit with cutting-edge technology. The result was this highly advanced all-wheel drive version of the Dodge Daytona iRock RT, an already nimble and sporty coupe that, with the addition of an AWD system, could have rewritten the rules for American performance cars. This prototype was not a simple drivetrain swap. It was a painstakingly engineered piece of automotive innovation. Taking cues and parts from the Mitsubishi Stealth platform, Chrysler's engineers reworked the Daytona's chassis to accept a sophisticated all-wheel drive system featuring a central transfer case, electronically controlled differentials, and a recalibrated suspension setup that delivered not only enhanced traction, but also dramatically improved handling precision. The powertrain was the familiar turbocharged 2.2-liter inline-4, but with the AWD system's improved traction and torque distribution, it could exploit that power far more effectively than the front-wheel drive original. Drivers who tested the car marveled at how it combined blistering acceleration with razor-sharp cornering, inspiring confidence on wet or uneven surfaces. A revolutionary concept for American compact sports coupes of that era. Underneath, the engineers had to reinforce the chassis extensively to maintain structural rigidity, as the addition of the AWD system and related components added complexity and weight. Yet, through careful tuning and weight distribution, the prototype maintained an agile character, defying expectations that AWD systems always make cars sluggish. The car reportedly boasted a 0-60 mph time that challenged many contemporary sports cars, and its cornering grip reportedly matched or surpassed some European rivals. For a moment, it seemed Dodge was on the brink of redefining performance and driving excitement for the American compact segment, but this project faced insurmountable hurdles beyond the engineering realm. Dodge's marketing department struggled with how to position the car. The AWD Daytona iRock RT was too technologically advanced and sophisticated for traditional Mopar muscle car buyers, yet it lacked the brand cachet and premium aura that would attract enthusiasts who coveted European AWD sports cars. Additionally, production costs for such a specialized drivetrain and suspension setup were high, and the projected retail price risked alienating Dodge's core customer base. Executives were also wary that the car's advanced capabilities might overshadow the beloved V8-powered Dodge muscle cars or cause internal competition within the lineup. Internal politics and budget constraints ultimately doomed the AWD Daytona. Despite the overwhelmingly positive reception from test drivers and engineers who saw enormous potential, the program was quietly shelved before it could reach production. Prototypes and test mules were tucked away in storage, and the story of the AWD Daytona became the stuff of engineering lore and whispered legend within Chrysler's corridors. One Mopar suspension technician who worked intimately on the project recalled years later, "That car was like lightning in a bottle. It had the spirit and rawness of a muscle car, but handled like a European rally car. We knew we had something special, but nobody at the top knew where to put it. It was a car ahead of its time, but it was just too complex for the market back then." Today, the 1991 Dodge Daytona iRock RT AWD prototype that exists as a tantalizing glimpse into a path not taken, a fusion of American muscle car grit with rally-bred technological sophistication. It represents a moment when Chrysler engineers dared to challenge the norms and imagined a future where Mopar could compete on both straight-line speed and technical prowess. Though it never saw the showroom or the showroom floor, its legacy lives on as a fascinating what-if in American performance history, a hidden chapter reminding enthusiasts that even amidst turmoil, bold innovation sometimes flowers, only to be quietly stifled before the world can fully appreciate it. Number 10. The 1971 Chevrolet Chevelle 454 LS6 wagon holds a nearly mythical status among muscle car enthusiasts, standing as one of the most extraordinary and rare factory-built muscle wagons ever to roll off an American assembly line. At a time when muscle cars were reaching their peak in terms of raw power and performance, Chevrolet was also innovating quietly behind the scenes through its Central Office Production Order, COPO program. COPO was a special ordering system initially designed to provide race teams and select dealers access to unique, high-performance configurations that were not part of the regular production catalog. This system allowed for the creation of some of the most powerful and unusual vehicles of the era. And among the most fascinating was the Chevelle station wagon, fitted with the LS6 454 cubic inch big block V8, one of the most potent factory engines available. The idea of a full-size family wagon carrying a legendary muscle car engine is nearly inconceivable to the casual observer. But this sleeper combo was exactly what certain racers and performance enthusiasts quietly requested. While the standard Chevelle wagons were designed primarily for comfort, utility, and family hauling, these special-order COPO wagons were engineered to do much more. They housed the LS6 454, a brutal power plant producing roughly 450 horsepower, and a monstrous torque figure that propelled the car down the drag strip with shocking authority. The LS6 was the same powerhouse engine that powered the famed Chevelle SS 454 coupe, but packaging it under the hood of a large wagon was an engineering challenge that only the most daring at Chevrolet would entertain. The wagons equipped with the LS6 were intended primarily as race support vehicles, reliable transporters for race teams who wanted to bring their equipment to the track while having a powerful backup car that could easily be converted for competitive use. Because they were ordered through the COPO system, these wagons escaped typical showroom marketing and public awareness, allowing them to fly under the radar as practical family cars. Yet, beneath their conventional exterior, these wagons could outdrag many of the muscle car coupes and sedans on the road, offering a terrifyingly quick burst of speed that no one would expect from a vehicle with such a utilitarian appearance. Fitting the LS6 into the wagon required significant modifications beyond just engine installation. Heavy-duty suspension components, upgraded brakes, and reinforced chassis elements were necessary to handle the immense torque and power. These wagons were not just fast, they were engineered to be durable and track-capable, balancing the muscle of a drag racer with the everyday usability of a family vehicle. The seamless blend of brute force and practicality made these wagons incredibly special, though their extreme rarity meant they never entered the mainstream muscle car conversation. Today, the surviving examples of the 1971 Chevelle 454 LS6 wagons are among the most sought-after collector vehicles in the muscle car world. Their near-mythical status is amplified by the fact that only one or two are believed to have been produced, making them some of the rarest factory muscle cars ever made. These wagons are revered not only for their monstrous performance, but also for the audacity and ingenuity of Chevrolet engineers who dared to combine a family hauler with one of the most powerful engines of the muscle car era. A Copo registry archivist who has studied factory records and spoken with surviving engineers summarized their unique charm perfectly. You could drop your kids off at school, then head to the drag strip and run 12-second quarter miles without anyone ever suspecting what was under the hood. This statement captures the surreal duality of the Chevelle 454 LS6 wagon, a car that could blend seamlessly into the suburban landscape by day and unleash fury on the track by night. The 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle 454 LS6 wagon remains a stunning testament to the creative risks taken during muscle cars' golden age. It embodies the ultimate sleeper spirit, a vehicle that defied all expectations by delivering mind-boggling performance in an everyday, unassuming package. As muscle car collectors and historians continue to hunt down the few surviving specimens, this wagon stands as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous and thrilling cars come wearing the most ordinary disguises. Number 11. The 1989 Mercury Cougar XR7 supercharged 5-speed pre-release mule stands as one of the most intriguing what-could-have-been stories in the late 1980s American personal luxury coupe scene. At a moment when the segment was facing an uncertain future, caught between waning muscle car enthusiasm and growing consumer interest in more practical or modern vehicles, Ford's engineers quietly set about crafting a version of the Cougar that could truly reignite passion for the brand. The idea was deceptively simple, but radical for the time. Marry the smooth, torquey 3.8-liter supercharged V6 with a manual 5-speed transmission, giving the Cougar XR7 the kind of driver-focused performance and engagement that was sorely missing in many of its contemporaries. This mule wasn't just a test car, it was a glimpse into a possible future where Mercury could have had a genuine, visceral muscle coupe capable of surprising enthusiasts and challenging the status quo. The 3.8L supercharged V6 was already well regarded within the Ford family, offering excellent torque delivery and that unmistakable whine and snarl underboost that muscle car fans could appreciate. Pairing this engine with a manual transmission was the real stroke of genius, something almost unheard of for luxury coupes of the era, which predominantly relied on automatic transmissions for comfort and ease of use. The manual gearbox promised a direct and intimate connection to the car's power plant, allowing drivers to wring every ounce of performance from the supercharged V6 and experience the full potential of the car's chassis and suspension tuning. Inside the engineering and testing facilities, excitement around the project was palpable. Test drivers and engineers reported a car that was nimble, quick, and surprisingly raw, given the XR7's luxurious trappings. It could dart off the line with impressive punch and then carve through corners with confidence, thanks to subtle chassis upgrades and fine-tuned suspension components developed for the mule. It was a car that could appeal to both traditional Cougar buyers looking for comfort and new enthusiasts craving a genuine driver's car, something sporty yet refined. But despite this promise, the project was strangled by corporate conservatism and marketing fears. Mercury's leadership worried that introducing a manual transmission would alienate their core customer base, which was perceived as favoring automatic transmissions and softer ride qualities. Additionally, with the Thunderbird Super Coupe already positioned as the brand's performance flagship, there was a concern that a manual, supercharged Cougar might cannibalize sales or create internal competition within Ford's luxury lineup. This cautious mindset led to the abrupt cancellation of the manual XR7 program before it ever saw public release, and the handful of mule cars were quietly dismantled or repurposed. Documentation and records of the project were buried deep within Ford's archives, effectively erasing this potential game-changer from official history. A former MN12 program engineer, speaking under the condition of anonymity, expressed a bittersweet sentiment. The car had soul, something that made you want to push harder, drive faster, and really connect with the road. It had a boost sound that stuck in your mind for days. We begged to build it for real, to put it in showrooms, and prove Mercury could still make something exciting. But the suits didn't understand. They saw risk, not opportunity. This candid reflection perfectly captures the disconnect between the creative, performance-driven engineers and the risk-averse executives controlling the brand's future. Over 3 decades later, the 1989 Mercury Cougar XR7 supercharged 5-speed mule is an almost mythical artifact, a whispered legend among Mustang and Cougar enthusiasts and collectors. Its rarity and secretive nature only add to its allure. Few people outside Ford's inner circle have ever driven or seen one, and none were ever officially sold. For those who know the story, it represents a tantalizing glimpse at a different path American performance cars could have taken during a decade often viewed as stagnant or disappointing for muscle car fans. In today's collector circles, the Cougar XR7 5-speed mule symbolizes lost potential and the passion of engineers willing to challenge conventions, even when the powers that be said no. It stands as a reminder that sometimes the most exciting and innovative cars never make it to market, not because they lack capability, but because the corporate machine fears the risk of upsetting the status quo. The XR7 supercharged manual remains a ghost car, an echo of what might have been, and a dream for enthusiasts who yearn for a time when muscle was raw, accessible, and unapologetically fun. Number 12. The 1990 Plymouth Barracuda 426. Hemi lightweight is not just a rare muscle car, it's an emblem of raw, uncompromising performance, wrapped in an almost secretive cloak of obscurity. While the mainstream muscle car community often reveres the Hemi Cuda for its iconic styling and monstrous power, the lightweight variant represents a whole different breed of automotive ferocity, one that was built with a singular focus on drag strip domination and racing supremacy. This was a car forged for the most hardcore racers and engineers who demanded every possible advantage on the quarter mile, even if it meant stripping away every comfort, every ounce of excess weight, and every trace of street-legal civility. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the muscle car wars had escalated to an almost absurd level, with manufacturers pushing the boundaries of engine output and chassis refinement to win on the strip and in showroom prestige. Plymouth, competing fiercely with the likes of Chevrolet, Ford, and Dodge, sought to create a race-ready Barracuda that could obliterate the competition in the NHRA Superstock and factory experimental classes. The result was the lightweight Cuda, a car that took the already potent 426 Hemi and wrapped it in a skeletal chassis that was optimized for speed and agility above all else. This lightweight wasn't simply about power, it was about power-to-weight ratio perfected through painstaking engineering and brutal weight reduction. To reach its nearly mythical performance levels, Plymouth employed radical weight-saving measures. The body panels were made from acid-dipped steel to shed as much metal weight as possible without sacrificing structural integrity, resulting in a car that looked stock but weighed far less. Inside, all non-essential components were stripped away. That meant no sound deadening, no carpeting, no radio, and minimal interior trim. Just the driver, the controls, and the raw machinery. Even the glass was lighter than stock in many cases, replaced with thinner or sometimes plexiglass panels. Every detail was scrutinized and optimized, with the philosophy that every pound lost translated directly into faster acceleration and better handling. Mechanically, the 426 Hemi engine was a beast, already famed for its hemispherical combustion chambers that maximized airflow and combustion efficiency. In the lightweight Cuda, this engine was fitted with race-spec internals and tuned for maximum output. It was conservatively rated at over 425 horsepower, but many insiders believe the real output was significantly higher, especially on race fuel and with less restrictive exhausts. The monstrous torque produced was enough to rip the car off the line in a blistering launch that few other muscle cars could match, especially on the drag strip. The suspension and chassis were also tuned for racing excellence. Stiffer springs and shock absorbers, heavy-duty sway bars, and reinforced frame components worked in harmony to keep the car planted during brutal launches and high-speed runs. The entire package was designed to deliver consistent, predictable performance, even under the extreme stresses of competitive drag racing. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the lightweight Cuda's story is how deeply secret and rare it was. Plymouth manufactured only a handful of these machines, likely fewer than a few dozen, with many never intended for public sale or street use. These cars were, for the most part, test mules or purpose-built racers handed off to trusted teams or drivers. After their racing careers ended, many were dismantled or scrapped, partly to keep the exact specifications under wraps from rival manufacturers, and partly because the cars were too specialized to be of practical use. The rarity of surviving examples today makes the lightweight Cuda one of the most sought-after muscle cars in existence, commanding immense respect and sky-high prices whenever one surfaces at auctions or private collections. Those who worked on or raced these lightweight Hemis remember them with a mixture of awe and reverence. One veteran NHRA crew chief described it as a monster hiding in plain sight. Looked like a normal Barracuda, but under the hood and through the chassis, it was a weapon. You'd launch that thing, and the track would almost shake under the power. Drivers learn fast. Respect the car, or it would eat you alive. Such testimonies highlight the terrifying potential in the raw, unforgiving character of the lightweight Cuda, a car that was not built for casual driving, but for total domination of the strip. In the decades since its creation, the legend of the 1970 Plymouth Barracuda, 426 Hemi lightweight, has only grown, fueled by scarce documentation, the mystique of its rarity, and the whispered tales passed down by those who glimpsed its terrifying prowess firsthand. It stands not only as a pinnacle of Plymouth's muscle car era, but also as a symbol of the extremes